We start today on a cheering note as investors gain 18.97 billion naira as the Nigeria Stock Exchange All-Share Index inches up by 0.14% to open the week positive. This is a portfolio on NTA News 24, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. It's nice to have you join us today. I'm Chibobi Walter Naji. Now today we focus on making Nigeria's AGRIC sector export ready through agro-processing and value addition. But first, let's take the news segment with Comfort Amodu. Tell us, Comfort, what is the latest today?
Hello, Chimobi. Well, some development partners, including the International Labour Organization, Abuja Enterprise Agency, and the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDEN, are partnering to provide the needed material and human resources for the needed atmosphere to ensure the thriving of entrepreneurships in Nigeria. They also hope to reduce poverty and create employment and grant access to finance for growing businesses through the partnership. In line with the targets, the Abuja Enterprise Agency in the last 10 years has empowered over 73,000 businesses, 90% of whom are young people.
The agency has designed to expand its grants program to support the provision of work tools which will eliminate drudgery, sharing technology to help entrepreneurs and finance startups who are confronted with inadequate access to finance.
I have been attending in the last days a number of meetings with the federal government and attending a global forum on youth employment here in Nigeria. It is, I think, an absolute priority here in Nigeria. It is a priority to bring them the opportunity to earn a living and to live decently through their work.
Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has issued guidelines on responsible business conduct to validate the responsible business conduct principle contained in the Consumer Protection Framework for the institutions regulated by the CBN to protect the rights of consumers and to hold the institutions accountable. The Apex Bank says the objective of the guidelines is to protect consumers against the unethical and predatory practices that undermine consumer confidence in the use of financial services. The guidelines shall apply to all transactions by financial institutions licensed and regulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria and their agents, subsidiaries and associates. And moving on, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation says it is poised to end fuel importation in 2023. The Group Managing Director, NNPC Mele Kolukiari, who stated this at a conference on artificial intelligence, big data and mobile technology changing the future of the energy industry in Lagos, said Nigeria requires modern investment to revamp and expand the nation's refinery to support the growth of the downstream sector. He said the corporation would support the actualization of the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery, as well as other private initiatives. And that ends the news. I'm Comfort Amodu. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Comfort. Moving on now, the Federal Ministry of Finance and the Nigeria Commodity Exchange recently announced plans to incentivize agro-processing companies and exporters with excise tax and export duty rebates for operators that buy their raw materials and export commodities on the Commodities Exchange platform. Now, the Director General and Chief Executive Officer, Nigeria Commodity Exchange, Zahira Baba Ari, explained that the move was to encourage Nigerian exporters and agro-processors to provide and produce quality products while also keying into the Economic Recovery Growth Plan (ERGP) of the present administration. And our discussion on the program today is against this backdrop. And I have with me in the studio a farmer and an AGRIC expert, Mr. Tedeke Retson. Many thanks for joining us on the portfolio today.
It's nice being here.
All right, so first of all, currently Nigeria, is losing billions of dollars in exports of raw materials to other countries, especially as it concerns agriculture. How does this affect the agric sector?
It's a major crisis in the agric sector because we are practically making the crude oil mistake. If you don't process what you produce, you can never utilize the entire value chain. You can never empower your people and take them out of poverty. You can never encourage more Nigerians to go into farming. And you can never make agriculture a mainstay of the Nigerian economy. Now, sesame seed, for example, is one of the crop that we call it the crude oil of the agricultural sector. One of the biggest crises and the challenge that we have had with sesame seed is that most of those that produce sesame seed in Nigeria are not able to do the basic processing ability with sesame seed of cleaning it. You have to get the Chinese to come in, get it very low from us in the market, in the farms, and they go and clean it for export. That is the first place you lose value. So, for example, if it's costing sesame seed at the point got to about almost 700,000 to 800,000 naira per ton in the market. But guess what? Because it is not cleaned, the Chinese come in and they buy it from you at about 250,000, 300,000. Now look at what happens between the cleaning process and the export process. You're talking about almost 300,000 to 400,000 naira loss in that value process. Now we're not talking about processing into sesame seed oil. And so if we don't take the processing of what we produce, all the raw materials that come from AGRIC, we're talking about maize, we're talking about soya beans, even beef, meat itself. If we don't take the ability to be able to process it, package it properly for local consumption, and then make it viable for export, if you don't take hold of that gap, of that hole, the Nigerian farmer is never going to be productive. The Nigerian farmer is never going to be wealthy, let me use that word, and the youth are never going to be encouraged to come into farming. They always look at farming as this old crude method of you take hold, you go to the farm. They forget that the key component of industrial revolution for most of the advanced country today was agriculture. From Britain, cotton, to the United States, tea. Most of the crises we had in the world, all over the world, that led to real industrial growth and revolution all came from agriculture.
I'd like you to really respond to this very quickly, because that seems to be the trending story at the moment. Nigeria, in no distant time, obviously, is expected to ratify its agreement on the Continental Free Trade Area because of the committees are already set up and all of that. So work is ongoing. Now, I'd like you to address this. Now, agric processing, of what value would it add to the products that Nigeria is going to be bringing to the market?
So many of us so many Nigerian farmers are not interested, don't like that agreement. That's number one. Because one of the things that we have complained about is, for example, the issue of rice. There has been an increased production and capacity from the Nigerian farmer. So what we need is not to begin to open the Nigerian borders for more rice to come into Nigeria when we have not been able to set up the productive capacity to utilize the rice value chain. More than 90% of Nigerians eat rice every single day. So what do? What you first and foremost do is to ensure that rice is not only produced, cleaned and processed in Nigeria, but all of the other pharmaceutical benefits for rice and related processes are utilized in the local market. Once you are able to do that, then you have a value to take to not just the international market, but also to your regional market. Now, if you open up your regional market and then you have not utilized all that you can do with rice, what you are simply doing is you're actually putting even more burden on your local producers. Why am I saying this? One of the biggest challenges the Nigerian farmer has is infrastructure. The infrastructure are not there. So most of the time, the cost of production is actually very high. Now, with the cost of production high, the average Nigerian farmer needs to sell a little bit higher. You wait, that's why most of the time you see during harvest season, they don't want to sell. They want to sell when the price is scaled up a little bit. Now, you're not opening up a wider market that is going to bring in more producers in the Nigerian market, turn us into more of a dumping ground. When you do this without the corresponding policies and processes to ensure that the local capacity is properly maximized, what you are going to see is more rice millers leaving milling to go into importing rice. We must be able to avoid that. And that's why before the president signed it, I actually thought he was not going to sign it. Now that he has signed it, what must be done is to check what is going to be doing, what is going to be coming in at the border. See if, whether we like it or not, it has to be Nigeria first. See if tariffs can be introduced to curtail whatever is coming in, and then give your local producers, your local manufacturers, the ability to step up quickly, supporting them with loans, supporting them with machinery, so that they can be competitive. Because without competition, we will suffer from that agreement.
Now, unfortunately, really, most of our agricultural exports, rather, don't meet up to international standards at the stage of certification and all of that. What's responsible for this?
If you don't, there's a popular saying that a people who cannot feed themselves will die. And in the area, with regards to global trade, that's exactly what has happened to Nigeria for a very long time. We don't need to produce to the standard of the international community first. We only need to produce to the standard of what the Nigerian can consume first. Then from that level of standardization, it can begin to improve. You need to begin to create sale across the country for people to understand the values inherent and involved in the production capacity of the Nigerian agro market. The Nigerian agro market is $100 billion per annum market. Now, so what you first and foremost do is develop this local content, develop local manufacturing to a point where everybody understands that this and this are the standard you first need to meet up locally before you begin to talk about international standard. If you have that, you see, what we did, particularly with regards to the yam, you saw what happened with yam. A lot of our produce, when they go out, they are rejected and they come back. But once you develop your local content and your local capacity, what will happen is that most of these foreign investors will come in and invest in your local production, like they do with sesame seed with the Chinese and the Lebanese in places like Kano. What they have done is they come to set up factories here locally, so that they can use your local your labor locally, use your production capacity locally to be able to process what they need to export. So they understand the demand and the standard of what they want, and so they can export based on the standard that is needed in their country. Now, you have not developed your local ability. You have not developed your capacity.
Let's talk about really processing and adding value to what we produce locally. When we were talking earlier, the issue of Nigerian farmers not even getting interested, in finishing their produce, and that's a problem.
Absolutely. Now, why are they not getting interested in finishing their produce? It is because we operate in a short-term mindset, a short-term circle. Okay, the farmer is also challenged by the various factors of production that are practically working against him. You are in the farm, and guess what? You provide your power. You are in the farm, guess what? You provide your machineries. You are in the farm, you pay your laborers. So you realize that by the time you are harvesting, the burden on harvest is a lot. Now, what government has done, and this is what area we have to give credit to the federal government. In my farm, for example, almost all of the equipment we are using for processing of rice were sourced from the federal government warehouse in Kefi. Now, what that has done is to reduce my cost of production by more than 40%. Because if I'm setting up a mill outside, I'm going to spend about 40-50 million. Now I'm doing it for less than 10-50 million to get a mill ready. So, you see, by the time that capacity is taken off the head of the local Nigerian farmer, he cannot begin to think long term. Because right now he's thinking short term. His own is, let me produce, take to the market, sell, put whatever I can make in my pocket. But by the time you take off a burden of the cost of production from him, what you would then do is to begin to think about production, warehousing, processing, and export. Let me also add this. Look at Australia. Australia has a population of about 25 million people. There are about 27 million cows in Australia. And so in 2018, Australia brought in $60 billion from the packaging, processing, and farming of cows alone.
Okay, so I'd like to stop you there, since you've mentioned the issue of cows. Recently, the Central Bank of Nigeria did say that they may be going into forex restriction for dairy products. How much capacity, do farmers have locally to go into dairy production?
The capacity will always be there if the policy directions are known. The capacity will come. The average local farmer, the average Fulanima, for example, let me use the Fulanima because we know them to be mostly into range of animal. Okay. With about 10 cows, if the policy are in place, he can milk those 10 cows for milk. You can begin to create pocket of dairy units, not dairy plant, not dairy manufacturing plant, but dairy unit to be able to access and take from him what is producing and move on to the real off-takers, as in the producers that need to use their dairy, their milk for their production plant. What must be done is the CBN's forward-thinking process. We are no longer going to give forests to those who are importing milk. We are no longer going to give forests to those who are importing beef. Once you set that policy in motion, what to then do is to begin to create what I call feedlot across the country. Okay? Now, you encourage those who have cows to move their cows to those feedlots. You create high energy, high protein feeding packages for farmers. Now, in places like Nasarawa, where our farm is located, we planted the Rizzi grass from NAPRI, National Seed Research, Animal Research, one of the institutes in Zaria. Yeah. We planted the grass. Within 4 weeks, if you see the picture, you'll be shocked. Now, we are already going through the process of harvesting the Rizzi grass, high premium protein grass, so that we can feed our animals that we're bringing in from VOM, as in the Research Institute in Jos. Now, in Jos, you wouldn't believe it. In Jos here, you have the Frisian breed of cattle, that is capable of giving you 50 liters of milk a day. Okay? Now, so if the research structure is in Jos, if the artificial insemination of those sperm for more of these animals to create hybrid across the country is in Jos, what does it therefore take to go to the CBN and say, look, I want to be able to go to this. The facility is available. Give us another 1 or 2 years so that we can have process and policy stability. Then we rev up our capacity to produce what our manufacturers locally will need. See, sometimes you need to get hungry to be able to feed yourself. Sometimes you need to go through that process of hunger. This country needs to go through this stomach revolution. During the cultural and economic revolution in China, more than 70 million Chinese died. Now, you look at it from the context of, if we are ready to stabilize the Nigerian state and increase our GDP, not just increase the GDP, but increase the level of unemployed Nigerians in the market, you need to force so many of us to the agri sector, but create policies across the country to be able to address the need of the manufacturer, address the need of the farmer, address the need of the consumer, which is what all of this, which are the cardinal point of the processing of what we're producing.
Just for want of time, because a lot needs to be talked about, as far as value addition is concerned. What is the place of research? How far have we gone?
Research is the foundation of processing, foundation of cultivation, is also the foundation of warehousing and packaging. I'm going to use maize as an example. Most of us in Nigeria, the average yield for the maize in all of our research institute don't go beyond 4 tons per hectare. Now, a ton of maize, as we speak, is selling for just about 60,000 naira. Now, so if a ton of maize is selling for about 60,000 naira, the cost of production of maize is 315,000 naira. It means that it is 60 times 4, which is 240,000. So I am already losing before I enter the market. Meanwhile, in places like Thailand, China, most of these other countries, the cost of production, the numbers of yield per hectare for maize is anywhere from 5 to 15 tons per hectare. So if I do an average of 10 tons per hectare, what has happened? What has happened is that even before we enter the market, I'm already in a competitive advantage. I'm already with comparative advantage. So the key for us is we need to be able to work on our research, because if we don't, you will realize that every time, even if we increase the number of Nigerian farmers, if we increase even a production plant, what is going to happen to you is that you're going to realize that there's increase in capacity to produce, but there is no capacity from the farmers to meet up your production. So it is imperative that all of our research institutes, our government spend a lot of money on research. We should stop talking about this GMO or non-GMO nonsense, as far as I'm concerned. Sorry for using that word. But the point is this.
Yes.
A country must be able to develop its own research capacity and support the private sector, because nobody should tell you that the government have no reason being in business. As I speak to you right now, the United States is still one of the biggest investors, the government is still one of the biggest investors in the research that the private sector finally take up to work with. So, any government, US is the #1 subsidy provider for farm produce. When China had problem with the Americans, Donald Trump supported soya beans farmer in the United States with how much? 12 billion United States dollars. Okay, that is a government coming in to do what? To say, sorry, our soya beans farmer, you cannot suffer because of the challenge I'm having with China. We must get to a point where government must stand up and say, look, whether you like it or you don't.
So talking
government must
talking about government now, because unfortunately our time is fast spent. In just 1 minute, 60 seconds, please. What has been the partnership, between the federal and the state government in providing the needed support, for farmers to thrive as far as processing is concerned?
In all honesty, the state government and the local governments are doing nothing. The only agency among the three arms of government, among the three structures of government, the only one that has actually taken agricultural structure is the federal government. And like I said, imagine that I'm farming in Nasarawa, for example. It is the federal government that have approached to take machineries, research support and the rest from. So once there is no synergy between all these three arms of structure of government, you are always going to have a problem of lagging behind with regards to research, with regards to production, with regards to processing. What needs to be done is that synergy must be enforced. The state government must be forced to do something about agriculture, because it's the only sector of the Nigerian economy that is capable of growing this economy with more than 10% within the next decade, and also reducing our unemployment below to a single digit within the next decade.
All right, thank you very much. I've been speaking with a farmer, and he's the national coordinator, National Farmers Group, Tadeke Redson. Many thanks for being with us on the portfolio today.
It's my pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. It's now time for a review of the capital market, and Bosede Abel is our guide. Do stay with us.
Hello and welcome to the market segment of the program. It was a slippery start for stock market investors around the world. In the local market, the bears have continued to squeeze out the twin market gauges of the Nigerian Stock Exchange as investor apathy persists. Year-to-date returns has so far depreciated by 12.09%. The week ended Friday, the 2nd of August 2019, the NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization depreciated further by 1.038% and 1.032% to close at 27,630.46 and 13.4 trillion naira. The fall was recorded in all other indices as well, with the exception of NSE ASM and NSE Industrial Goods, which appreciated by 0.17% and 0.98%. A total turnover of 759.2 million shares worth 14.038 billion naira was traded by investors in 16,209 in the week under review. A look at the sectors indicate that the financial services industry led the activity chart with 495.6 million shares valued at 5.15 billion naira traded in 7,832 deals. It was followed by a distant conglomerate industry with 68.2 million shares worth 136.8 million in 896 deals, while the third place was ICT industry with a turnover of 53.9 million shares worth 4.7 billion naira in 849 deals. Zenith Bank PLC, Guaranty Trust Bank PLC, and United Bank for Africa PLC were the most active stocks in the course of the week. They jointly accounted for 237.8 million shares worth 4.2 billion naira in 3,555 deals. A total of 87,142 units of exchange-traded products, ETPs, valued at 1.18 million naira were traded during the week in 18 deals. Also, 433,774 units of federal government bonds, valued at 445.3 million naira, were traded in 16 deals. On the price movement chart, 32 equities appreciated in price, 27 equities depreciated, while 109 equities remained unaffected. That's the size of the market review. The rest of the program continues shortly.
Thank you very much, Bosade. And that's the size of our package for this week. You can send us your comments and suggestions on the platforms that are showing right there on your screen. Till next week, Chimobi Walter Naji. You have yourself a great week ahead.